My daughter-in-law's scream echoed through the living room like a dry thunderclap, splitting the little air I had left in my lungs right in two. I am Eleanor. I am 71 years old. I was a geography teacher for 4 decades, and today I discovered that to my only son's wife, I am nothing more than a piece of old, cumbersome furniture taking up too much space. I have a secret kept at the bottom of my blue suitcase, one that will change the coordinates of this house forever. I've been living with my son Robert and his wife Claire for 3 years now. So you won't be alone, Mom, he told me with that good boy face he's always had, the one that served him so well to hide his lack of character. So you can lend us a hand, she added, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The hand became the whole arm, then the back, and finally, my entire life. Today was one of those days that seemed to last 100 hours. Since the sun broke through the kitchen window, my feet hadn't touched the floor, except to run from one side to the other. I have 3 grandkids who are the light of my life, but who possess the energy of a Category 5 hurricane. The oldest, Jake, 8 years old, decided the living room was a battlefield for his plastic soldiers. The middle one, Lucy, 5, ran a fever and threw up twice on the rug I had washed myself just last week. And the baby, little Nikki, 10 months old, is teething and hasn't stopped crying for a single second, as if the pain in his gums were the pain of the whole world. By 5 in the afternoon, my knees were shaking. My hip ached, that sharp pain that reminds me of the dampness of past winters. I had cooked lunch, a roast chicken with potatoes, dicing the onions paper thin exactly the way Claire likes them, making sure the garlic didn't burn. I had scrubbed Lucy's vomit, rubbing it with vinegar and baking soda so no smell would linger. I had rocked Nikki to sleep, pacing the endless hallway of the apartment until my arms felt like lead. I had helped Jake with his math, explaining with endless patience that if you have 5 apples and eat 2, you have 3 left, even though he insisted he would eat them all. When the wall clock struck 6:30, I was sitting on the edge of the sofa with Nikki finally asleep in my lap. The house wasn't perfect. There were toys on the floor because Jake refused to pick them up. There was a dirty plate on the table because I didn't have time to wash it before the baby started crying again. But there was peace. Or so I thought. The key turned violently in the lock. Claire came in like a gust of wind, slamming her purse onto the dining table with a sharp thud. She wore a scowl, that vertical line between her eyebrows that carves itself in when traffic has been heavy or when her boss has given her a bad look. Robert walked in behind her, head down, carrying his briefcase like it was full of stones. "What on earth is this?" she yelled, and her voice woke Nikki, who instantly let out a wail. I tried to stand up, but the weight of the baby and the ache in my joints made me slow. "Claire, please. The baby just fell asleep," I whispered, trying to defuse the bomb before it detonated. She didn't listen. Her eyes, lined in a perfect black that hadn't smudged all day, scanned the living room like a radar looking for flaws. She saw the plastic soldier under the table. She saw the crooked throw pillow, but mostly, she saw my exhaustion, and instead of compassion, it fueled her rage. "The house is filthy," she roared, pointing at the floor with an accusing finger and an impeccable red manicure. "I come home from working 10 hours like a mule to find this pigsty. Look at this. There's dust on the TV." Robert tried to intervene, but it was an attempt so weak it sparked pity. "Honey, I'm sure Mom didn't have time. The kids, don't give me excuses, Robert." She cut him off, spinning toward me with a fury that froze my blood. "I asked you for one thing, Eleanor. One single thing. To keep the house decent. You don't pay rent. You don't pay electricity. You eat our food. The least you could do is keep this place clean." I felt the heat crawl up my neck. "I don't pay rent, that's true. But my teacher's pension, which isn't a fortune, but isn't pennies either, goes entirely to the grocery store every month. I buy the meat, the fruit, Nikki's diapers. I paid for the washing machine repair last month when she overloaded it, but in her mental accounting, I am a burden. Claire, the kids have been very restless today. Lucy threw up and..." I tried to explain, keeping my voice steady, that same voice I used in the classroom to calm down 40 teenagers. "Excuses? You always have an excuse." She stepped closer, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive perfume and corporate stress. "You are ungrateful. We give you a roof and this is how you pay us back. You are good for nothing, you lazy old woman. Sitting here all day scratching your belly, while we work ourselves to death." The phrase hung suspended in the air. Good for nothing, lazy old woman. I looked at my son. I waited. I waited for that crucial second where he was supposed to raise his voice and say, "Don't speak to my mother like that." I waited for him to remember who cleaned his scraped knees when he fell off his bike, who worked double shifts to pay for his college tuition, who gave him the down payment for this very apartment. But Robert looked down. He started untying his shoes, as if the argument had nothing to do with him. His silence hurt more than her screaming. It was a complicit, cowardly silence. The silence of a man who preferred the comfort of not fighting with his wife over the dignity of his mother. Right then, something broke inside me. It wasn't my heart, like they say in the soap operas. It was something harder, like a rusted chain finally giving way. I felt a sudden clarity, cold and absolute. I placed Nicky gently in his playpen, even though he was still whimpering. I stood up straight. My back popped, but I forced myself to stand as tall as humanly possible. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked her in the eyes with an intensity that made her falter for a split second. I saw her blink, confused by my lack of reaction. She expected me to apologize, to lower my head like I always did. I walked past her without brushing her shoulder and headed toward my bedroom. "And don't turn your back on me when I'm talking to you," she screamed behind me. I closed my bedroom door and slid the lock. The noise from outside was muffled. I sat on the bed, that twin bed that used to be Jake's and was now my only refuge. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was an adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. I looked around. In that tiny room, crammed with boxes of things that didn't fit anywhere else, was my life reduced to its absolute bare minimum. But my eyes settled on the closet. Up there, on the top shelf, behind some old blankets, sat my old brown leather suitcase, and inside it, my safe conduct pass. I got up and pulled the suitcase down. It smelled of confinement and mothballs. I opened it on the bed. My fingers searched the inner pocket and pulled out a small notebook with black covers and yellowed pages. It was my field journal, the one I used when I took my students on field trips to the mountains, but in recent years it had served a different purpose. I opened it. Written right there were the account numbers. Not the account Robert knows about, where my pension is deposited and which is always empty by the end of the month. No, the other one. The account I opened with the money from the sale of the big house. The one I sold when my husband died and before I moved in here. Robert thinks that money went entirely to debts and medical bills. I never corrected him. I wanted to have an emergency fund, just in case. The just in case had arrived, and it had a first and last name, Claire Miller. I looked at the balance scribbled on the last page. It was enough. More than enough. And then I touched the folded paper tucked next to the notebook. The deed to a small property on the coast, in a fishing town called Cedar Key. A little house my late husband and I bought 30 years ago, thinking of retirement, which had been rented out to a foreigner all this time. The tenant's lease expired last week. The house is empty. The house is mine. I started packing, not in a rush, but with method, like someone preparing for a geographical expedition. Light clothes, my blood pressure medication, my reading glasses, a photo of my grandkids that I took out of its frame so it would take up less space. I didn't take anything they had given me. I left the gray sweater Claire gave me last Christmas because it was too big for her own mother, folded perfectly over the chair. Outside, the yelling had stopped. I could hear the clinking of silverware. They were eating dinner. Surely Claire was complaining that I hadn't set the table, and Robert was nodding, eating the chicken I cooked. The irony twisted my mouth into a crooked smile. I waited. The hours ticked by slowly. I listened as they bathed the kids, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. I heard Robert snoring through the wall. At 3 a.m, the house was in a sepulchral silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I dressed in my most comfortable slacks and a pair of sneakers. I put on my beige coat, the one with the deep pockets. I checked the suitcase one last time. I zipped it up carefully to avoid making a sound. I grabbed my cell phone and opened the rideshare app. My fingers, usually clumsy with technology, moved with surgical precision. Destination, Greyhound Bus Terminal. The Coastal Express leaves from there every hour. I walked out of the bedroom at 5:50 in the morning. The living room was draped in shadows. The streetlights bled through the window, illuminating the toys Claire hadn't picked up, despite all her screaming. I walked through the kitchen. On the table, I left my set of keys to the apartment. Nothing else. Not a note, not an explanation, not a tear-stained letter. My absence would be my message. I opened the front door. The cool dawn air hit my face, and I felt like I was truly breathing for the first time in 3 years. The car was waiting downstairs, its headlights cutting through the dark. The driver, a young guy in a baseball cap, helped me load the suitcase into the trunk. "Good morning, ma'am. Up early or out late?" he asked kindly, as I settled into the back seat. I looked up at the third-floor window. It was pitch black. My son and his wife were sleeping up there, completely certain that when they woke up they would have breakfast ready and the useless old woman willing to scrub away their miseries. They had no idea that the cook, the nanny, the maid, and the emotional punching bag had just handed in her irrevocable resignation. "Neither one, young man," I answered, feeling an ancient, powerful force waking up in my chest. "I am escaping from prison." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror and smiled. He put the car in drive, and we pulled away down the deserted avenue, leaving the concrete city behind. I pulled out my black notebook and traced my thumb over the paper. I imagined the ocean. I imagined the salt on my skin. I imagined the silence. But above all, I imagined the look on Claire's face when she woke up in 2 hours and discovered that the lazy old woman had taken more than just her clothes. She had taken their comfort. The journey was just beginning, and I, Eleanor, the retired geography teacher, was about to redraw the map of my entire existence. The interstate bus smelled of cheap coffee and pine disinfectant, a mixture that at any other time would have turned my stomach, but today tasted like pure liberty. I sat by the window, on the shady side, watching the gray city buildings shrink until they disappeared, swallowed by the deep green vegetation lining the highway toward the coast. At 71, with my knees protesting the damp air and my heart beating with a force I thought was long gone, I felt like a fugitive in an action movie. Only my weapon wasn't a gun, but a gold debit card tucked deep inside my bra. I didn't close my eyes for the entire 4-hour ride. Like a good geography teacher, I dedicated myself to observing the terrain. I watched the topography change, from the suffocating urban valleys to the open rolling hills that announced the sea. Every mile I put between my daughter-in-law Claire and myself was a weight lifted off my shoulders. I pictured the absolute chaos unfolding in the apartment at that exact moment. It would be 8 in the morning. Claire would be frantically searching for Jake's socks. Baby Nicky would be screaming because no one had mashed his bananas to the exact texture only I knew how to get right. And Robert would be staring at the clock, realizing he was going to be late for work, paralyzed by the absence of his mother, the useless one. When I stepped off at the Cedar Key terminal, the blast of humid, salty heat welcomed me like a hug from an old friend. The town had changed a little in the 3 years I was gone, held hostage by my grandmotherly duties, but its core remained the same. The hum of golf carts, the fruit vendors with their baskets, and that unhurried rhythm unique to places where the ocean dictates the time. The first thing I did wasn't to go to the house. I went to the bank. I needed to touch reality with my own hands. I walked into the small branch across from the town square, with its humming air conditioning and spotless white tile floors. I approached the ATM with an irrational fear. What if the bank had gone under? What if my memory failed me on the pin? My fingers, which had trembled so many times while serving soup to Claire, out of fear of staining the tablecloth, now moved firmly across the keypad. Check balance. The screen blinked for a second that felt like an eternity, and there it was, the figure. The money from the sale of my big house, plus the accumulated interest, plus the rent the property management company had been religiously depositing month after month. It was a substantial sum. I wasn't a millionaire with yachts and absurd luxuries, but I was a woman rich in options. I could pay for nurses, I could pay for cabs, I could eat at restaurants every single day if I felt like it. I could buy Claire's arrogance and hand it back to her wrapped in a gift box. I printed the receipt just for the sheer pleasure of holding it. I folded it carefully and tucked it next to my black notebook. I walked out of the bank with my chin held high. A lottery vendor approached me. "Want a ticket, ma'am, to change your luck?" he asked with a toothless grin. I bought the whole booklet without haggling. "My luck already changed, son. This is just for fun," I told him, leaving a tip that made his eyes go wide as dinner plates. I walked the 4 blocks to my house, my property. It is a simple structure with white clapboard walls and a metal roof, featuring a wide front porch where I used to sit with my husband to watch the afternoons fade away. The paint on the wooden fence was peeling, and the front yard was a jungle of weeds, but it was mine. I pulled out the set of keys I had guarded like a sacred treasure at the bottom of my suitcase. The key turned smoothly, without resistance, as if welcoming me home. Inside, it smelled of stale air and dust, but beneath the white sheets covering the furniture, I recognized my former life. There was my wicker rocking chair. There was the coffee table where I graded thousands of exams, and on the faux fireplace mantel, an old wooden radio my husband restored before he died. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and let myself fall onto the covered sofa. The silence was absolute. There was no screaming, no television blasting cartoons at top volume, no orders barked from the doorway. Just the distant sound of waves crashing against the sand. I looked at my hands. They were rough from the bleach and the cheap dish soap Claire bought. "You are good for nothing," she had told me. That phrase bounced off the empty walls of my house. I stood up, propelled by an anger that no longer hurt, but moved me. I went to the bathroom and looked in the stained mirror. I saw an older woman, yes, with wrinkles that were maps of my laughter and my tears. With gray hair, I stopped dyeing because Claire thought it was an unnecessary expense. But I also saw eyes that had recovered the brilliant spark of authority. "Eleanor," I said out loud, testing how my name sounded in my own home. "Welcome to your kingdom. I needed supplies." I stepped back out and walked over to Martha's general store, 2 blocks down. I hoped she wouldn't recognize me, or maybe thought she might not even be alive anymore. But there she was, older and more stooped behind the wooden counter lined with jars of candy. "Good afternoon," I said. She squinted, adjusting the thick glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Good Lord Almighty," she exclaimed, pressing a hand to her chest. "Is that Mrs. Eleanor? I thought the earth had swallowed you whole." "Almost, Martha, almost. But the earth spit me back out," I joked. The warmth with which she treated me was the most brutal contrast I had felt in years. She didn't speak to me like I was a stupid child, nor like I was a slow burden. She spoke to me as an equal, as a respected neighbor. She asked about my health, about my kids, and I lied with astonishing ease. "They're doing well, just very busy," I said. I bought coffee, fresh bread, cheese, ham, brooms, rags, and bleach. But this time, I bought the expensive bleach, the one that smells like lavender. I paid with a large bill and felt zero guilt. I walked back home carrying the bags. The weight reminded me of the grocery runs I did for my daughter-in-law, but the difference was staggering. This food was for me. No one would eat the best part of the chicken, leaving me only the bone. No one would complain that the bread was too hard or too soft. I spent the afternoon cleaning. It might seem ironic to escape cleaning one house just to arrive and clean another, but the psychology of labor is a funny thing. Sweeping my own dust, mopping my own floors, shaking out my own memories, it was an act of possession. With every sweep of the broom, I swept away a little of the toxicity from the last 3 years. In a kitchen drawer, I found an old manual can opener, rusted but functional. I held it for a moment. It was a simple object, stupid even, but it was mine. It wasn't grandma's, it wasn't hand me that, it was my can opener. By dusk, the house no longer smelled of confinement, but of lavender and coffee. I brewed myself a large mug, black and without sugar, exactly the way I like it and how I could never drink it, because Robert was repulsed by the smell of strong coffee. I took the old wooden radio off the mantel, put in the fresh batteries I bought from Martha, and turned it on. A local station was playing old jazz standards. I sat on the porch, in my now uncovered wicker rocking chair, watching the sun sink into the Gulf, dyeing the sky in violent shades of orange and violet. It was a perfect geographical spectacle. Then, and only then, I decided I was ready for the second act. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. I had kept it on airplane mode since I walked out of the apartment. My fingers brushed the black screen. I knew that turning on that little light would open a floodgate to the madness I had left behind. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with salty air, and turned off airplane mode. The phone vibrated, and kept vibrating as if it were having an epileptic seizure in the palm of my hand. 54 missed calls, 18 voicemails, 102 text messages. Most were from Robert, a few from an unknown number I assumed belonged to Claire's office. I started reading, not with fear, but with the scientific curiosity of someone studying the behavior of an ant colony after kicking over their anthill. Robert, 7:15 a.m. Mom, where are you? I went to your room and you're not there. Did you go to the store? Robert, 7:30 a.m. Mom, answer. Nicky is crying and we can't find his pacifier. Claire, 7:45 a.m. From Robert's phone. Eleanor, this isn't funny. Stop hiding, we're going to be late. Robert, 8:10 a.m. Mom, for God's sake, did something happen to you? We're worried. Claire, 8:30 a.m. You are completely irresponsible. You made me miss a massive meeting. When you get back, we are having a very serious conversation. I let out a dry laugh that startled a lizard running along the siding. When you get back, I thought. The arrogance of that woman knew no limits. She still believed this was a tantrum, a quick trip around the corner to pout. It hadn't crossed her mind that the lazy old woman had a plan. I kept scrolling through the messages. As the day progressed, the tone shifted from anger to logistical despair. Robert, 12 p.m. Mom, I had to leave work. We didn't know who to leave the kids with. Claire is furious. Please, call us. Robert, 1 o'clock p.m. I called the hospitals. I called the police. Mom, you're scaring me. Where are you? That message sparked a twinge of guilt. Robert was weak, yes, but he was my son. I didn't want him to think I was dead. But then I remembered his silence from the night before. I remembered how he untied his shoes, while his wife humiliated me. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold determination. They had to learn, and hard lessons require a heavy hand, or in this case, a heavy absence. The last message had come through 5 minutes ago. Robert, 6:25 p.m. Mom, we found your keys on the table. Did you leave? Why? We don't have anything in the fridge for dinner. Jake is asking for you. I brought the coffee mug to my lips. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like absolute glory. We don't have anything in the fridge. Of course not, because the magic refrigerator that filled itself thanks to my pension and my back-breaking effort hauling bags had stopped working. I thought about replying, typing a simple, "I'm fine," but my thumbs hovered over the keyboard and stopped. No. If I answered now, I would give them relief. I would give them the certainty that I was within their reach. And power resides in uncertainty. They needed to feel the void. They needed the house to be truly dirty. They needed the kids to cry inconsolably. They needed dinner to not appear by pure magic. They needed to live in the real world, the one I had shielded them from for 3 solid years. I set the phone face down on the table. The radio started playing a soft blues track. I hummed the melody quietly. I got up and walked into the kitchen. I opened my black notebook on the clean counter. On a fresh page, I drew a vertical line down the middle. On the left side, I wrote what they believe. Underneath, I wrote that I am old, poor, useless, and dependent. On the right side, I wrote the reality. Underneath, I wrote, I have a house, I have money, I have time, and I have a will of iron. I looked out the window at the dark street. Fireflies were blinking in the overgrown yard. Tomorrow, I would go to the local salon. I would cut my hair. Maybe I'd get my nails painted a scandalous red, just like Claire's, just to laugh at the sheer irony of it. My life as a piece of old furniture was over. My life as a strategist had just begun. And I had a sneaking suspicion that back in the city, it was going to be a very, very long night for the perfect family. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the glow of the moon spilling through the large window. Tomorrow would be another day, and for the first time in a long time, the day would be entirely mine. Let them suffer a little more, I whispered to the dark, feeling a perverse, delicious satisfaction. We are only just getting started. The coastal sun doesn't ask for permission. It pushes through the cracks in the wooden shutters with a hot, golden authority that forces you awake, but without the violence of an alarm clock or a screaming baby. I stretched out on the bed, taking up the entire mattress, feeling my bones pop. But this time it was a settling pop, like an old house settling into its foundation, not a crack of pain. It was 7 in the morning. In my former life, the one I abandoned barely 24 hours ago, by this time I would have already changed 3 diapers, cooked 4 different breakfasts, and been sweeping toast crumbs from under the high chair. Here, the only thing I had to sweep was a little bit of sand the wind had pushed under the front door. I got up and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The cold tile felt glorious under my feet. While the coffee brewed, filling the house with that dark, promising aroma, I opened my black notebook. I had a plan. Running away wasn't enough. I had to fortify my new reality. If I wanted this house to be my fortress, I needed allies and I needed repairs. The front fence was leaning, the paint was peeling like sunburned skin, and the yard was a jungle. I stepped out onto the porch with my mug. A man was riding by on a bicycle selling sweet pastries. I bought 2 bear claws and asked him if he knew anyone for maintenance work. Look for Hank, the guy who lives down by the inlet. That man will build you a wall with one hand and fix your plumbing with the other, the baker told me, handing over the pastries in a brown paper bag. That morning, as I walked toward town looking for Hank, I felt a strange lightness in my purse. I wasn't carrying wet wipes or backup toys or crushed crackers, just my wallet, my keys, and my phone, which was still vibrating intermittently like a wounded animal in my pocket. I didn't look at it. Not yet. First, I had to secure my perimeter. I found Hank fixing a fishing net in his front yard. He was a man around my age, maybe a little older, with sun-leathered skin and hands that looked like mangrove roots. "Good morning," I said, using my teacher voice, firm but polite. "I was told you work miracles with old houses." Hank looked me up and down, without the rush or the judgment of city folks. "Only God works miracles, ma'am. I just do carpentry and plumbing. What do you need?" We negotiated. I didn't haggle over the price of his labor, but I was demanding about the materials. I wanted the house to shine. I wanted to make sure that if Robert or Claire ever dared to come looking for me, they would find a mansion of dignity, not the sad refuge of an old woman. I gave him a cash advance. Watching his eyes widen as he took the bills without hesitation was my first victory of the day. In the city, Claire audited every grocery receipt to make sure I hadn't stolen the change from buying bread. Here, I was the boss. On my way back, I passed by a beachwear shop. I stopped in front of the window display. A pair of oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses with dark lenses caught my eye. I went in and tried them on. They hid my dark circles. They hid my doubt. They made me look mysterious, inaccessible. I bought them. Stepping back onto the street with them on, I felt like I had just strapped on armor. When I got home, the phone rang again. It was the specific ringtone I had assigned to my son's house. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then, I sat in the rocking chair, put on my new sunglasses, even though I was in the shade, and picked up the device. 112 missed calls in total. Curiosity, that old geographer's vice of needing to know what lies on the other side of the mountain, won out. I opened my messages. The tone had shifted drastically. From initial anger and logistical confusion, they had moved into the accusation and chaos phase. Claire, 9:15 a.m. Eleanor, this is the last straw. Jake can't find his gym uniform. Where did you put it? Answer me. Robert, 10:30 a.m. Mom, we had to order pizza last night and it made Nicky sick. He's been throwing up all morning. Claire is hysterical. Please, drop the drama and tell us where you are. I smiled with a coldness that surprised me. Drama, they called it. 30 years of a career, 3 years of domestic slavery, and my departure was drama. Jake's uniform was a simple fix. It was in the ironing basket, exactly where I left it 2 days ago. If Claire had ever lifted the lid of that basket once in her life, she would know. But she only knows how to drop dirty laundry on top of the washer, expecting elves or her mother-in-law to process it. But then I read a message that made me sit up straight. Claire, 11 a.m. If you don't show up by this afternoon, I'm changing the locks. Let's see how you get back in to get your old rags then. There it was. The threat. The stupid belief that I needed to return. That their apartment was my entire world. They understood nothing. They didn't know my old rags were already here, or that I couldn't care less about the ones I left behind. I decided it was time to make my first strategic move. Not a direct reply, but a reminder of who actually held up the pillars of their comfort. I opened my banking app. I checked the automatic debits. There it was. Telecommunications services, premium family plan, high-speed internet, cable TV with all the sports channels Robert watches, and the cartoon networks that hypnotize the kids. $120 a month drafted right out of my account. From my pension. Why? Mom, you're home all day. You use it the most. My fingers moved with precision across the touchscreen. Cancel subscription. Are you sure? Yes. Effective date, immediate. I also pulled up the online grocery delivery account. The one where my credit card was saved so emergency orders could magically appear. I deleted it. I wiped the payment info and changed the password. I felt an almost childish satisfaction, imagining the exact moment the TV screen would go black in the middle of a football game, or when Jake tried to watch his cartoons and got a no-signal message. It was petty, maybe, but it was necessary. They had to understand that magic cost money and effort, and the magician had retired. I got up and made myself a simple lunch, rice with fresh shrimp I bought down by the docks. As I chopped the cilantro, the smell transported me back to summers with my husband, when life was simple and the future felt endless. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, listening to the ocean. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Robert or Claire. It was Betty, my neighbor from 4B, the only friend I had left in that concrete building. I answered. Hello? Eleanor? Her voice was a whisper, like she was calling from a trench. Hi, Betty. So good to hear your voice, I replied calmly. Girl, there is a revolution going on here, she exclaimed, dropping her voice even lower. Claire has been screaming in the hallway. She says you stole the keys, that you've gone crazy. Robert is walking around looking like he's at a funeral. He can't handle her. They knocked on my door a while ago asking if I'd seen you. I told them no, of course, but Eleanor, are you okay? I am better than ever, Betty. I'm at my beach house looking at the water. I heard my friend sigh in relief. Oh, thank God. You had me worried. Listen, you can hear everything through the walls. The kids are crying nonstop. That girl, Claire, she doesn't even know how to boil water. Last night the fire alarms went off because she burned something in the oven. The fire department had to come. It was a whole scandal. The image of Claire in her sharp executive suit and perfect manicure, dealing with firefighters and smoke, was a balm to my wounded soul. Betty, listen to me closely, I told her, my tone turning serious. If they ask you again, you don't know anything. You don't know where I am. Just tell them you saw me leave with a suitcase, and that I looked very determined. Nothing else. Don't you worry, Eleanor. That woman hasn't said hello to me in the elevator in 5 years. I won't give her the time of day. But, are you coming back? I paused. I looked at the white walls of my house, the afternoon light pouring in clean and unfiltered. No, Betty, that Eleanor doesn't exist anymore. I hung up. That conversation with Betty gave me the piece of intel I was missing. The chaos was real. It wasn't just my imagination. My absence had caused the total collapse of their domestic ecosystem in less than 36 hours. I decided it was time for the final thrust. I couldn't let Claire control the narrative with the neighbors or the extended family, claiming I was crazy or missing. I had to prove I was in full possession of my faculties. I took a picture, not a clumsy selfie showing a double chin. I propped the phone on the windowsill, set the timer, and sat down in the rocking chair with my new sunglasses and a glass of ice-cold sweet tea in my hand, the ocean stretching out behind me. I looked dignified. I looked peaceful. I looked like I owned myself. I found Robert's contact. I didn't type a long text. I gave no explanations. I just sent the photo, and underneath it, 3 words. I'm not in the way here. The blue read receipt check marks appeared instantly. They were looking at it. 5 seconds later, the phone started ringing. It was Robert. I watched it vibrate on the table. 1, 2, 3 times. On the 4th, I swiped to answer. I put it on speaker and left it on the table while I kept rocking, staring out at the horizon. Mom, finally. Robert's voice was high-pitched, hovering on the edge of panic. Where are you? Is that Cedar Key? Did you go to the beach house? How did you get there? I didn't answer. I let his anxiety fill the silence. Mom, you have to come back. This is crazy. I can't find the car insurance papers and they expire tomorrow. The kids miss you. Nikki won't stop crying. Claire is very upset. Upset? I asked with a calm that starkly contrasted his hysteria. I thought she'd be thrilled. She finally has a house clean of my presence. Don't say that. Claire's voice broke in. She had snatched the phone. She sounded breathless. and in the background, I could hear the unmistakable sound of cartoons blasting at maximum volume, probably from an iPad, since the TV was dead. Eleanor, this is childish. Running off like this, without telling anyone. We have responsibilities. You have responsibilities, I corrected. Who is going to watch the kids tomorrow? I have a presentation with the regional director. I cannot miss it. That sounds like a logistical problem, Claire, I said, rolling the words around in my mouth like sour hard candies. And I am officially retired from logistics. You can't do this to us, she screamed, and her voice cracked. For the first time, I heard fear beneath the rage. Fear of losing her status, fear of failing at her job, fear of having to actually be a full-time mother and housewife. You are the grandmother. It is your duty. My duty ended the moment you told me I was good for nothing, I replied sharply. If I'm good for nothing, then I'm no good for watching your kids or scrubbing your floors. You're right, Claire. I'm just an old woman, and old folks need their rest. Mom, please, Robert whined. The cable got cut. We have no internet. Did you do something? I reviewed my finances, son. I cut out unnecessary expenses, just like you taught me. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. The realization hit them. In that exact second, the penny dropped. Not only had the free nanny walked out, but the bank had closed its doors. You cut off our internet? Claire asked, utterly bewildered. With the kids here? The kids can read a book, or play with those plastic soldiers it bothers you so much to see on the floor. I'm coming to get you, Claire threatened, her aggressive tone flaring back to life. We are driving down this weekend and we are bringing you back. You can't live there alone. Something might happen to you. I took off my sunglasses and glared at the phone as if I could see them through the screen. The house is mine, Claire. The deed is in my name. If you step one foot on this property without my invitation, I will call the police for trespassing. And believe me, the sheriff here has known me for 30 years. I heard Robert gasp. They had never heard me speak like this. Never. Mom, he started. I have company. I lied smoothly, watching Hank walk up the driveway carrying some tools. I am busy living my life. Do not call me again just to yell at me. If you want to talk, learn how to ask for permission. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't the tachycardia of fear. It was pure adrenaline. I felt powerful. I felt alive. Hank walked into the yard with a toolbox and a bag of cement. Afternoon, boss lady. Should we get started on that patio wall? He asked. Yes, Hank, I smiled, sliding the phone into my pocket. We are going to build that wall. And I want it high. Very high. While Hank started mixing the cement, I looked at my phone one last time. Robert had sent one more text. Robert, 4:15 p.m. Mom, the fridge is empty. We don't have milk for Nikki. Can you please unblock the grocery account? I'll pay you back. I stared at the message. I thought of my grandson. I thought of his little eyes. I felt a sharp pang of pain, an instinct to run and fix it. But then I remembered Claire's voice. Lazy old woman. I remembered Robert's silence. If I gave them the milk now, they would never learn how to buy the cow. I powered the phone off. That night, I ate dinner watching the stars from my freshly swept porch. In the distance, I could hear the crickets and the ocean. Back in the city, I pictured Robert standing in line at a crowded supermarket, exhausted, buying overpriced milk with his own money, while Claire tried to rock a crying baby to sleep without the help of a television. The lesson was just beginning, and I was a teacher with a lot of patience. Saturday dawned with a sky so blue it hurt your eyes, but the peace of my coastal paradise shattered at exactly 10:30 in the morning. I was on the porch supervising Hank, who was finishing up varnishing the wooden railing, when the strained engine of my son's SUV roared into the driveway. I didn't need binoculars to see the rolling disaster pulling in. The vehicle, usually immaculate because Robert washes it every Sunday like a religious ritual, was covered in highway dust and sported a fresh dent on the front bumper. They stepped out looking like they had just survived a shipwreck. Robert had dark purple bags under his eyes that reached his cheekbones. His shirt was violently wrinkled, and there was a coffee, or maybe baby formula, stain on his slacks. But it was Claire who stole the show. The Iron Lady, the executive with the flawless manicure, looked like she had fought a blender and lost. Her hair was thrown up in a messy bun, she wore zero makeup, and her high heels sank awkwardly into the sandy driveway. "Mom," Robert yelled, running toward the fence. His voice was an agonizing mix of relief and accusation. I stayed seated in my rocking chair, my dark sunglasses on, a glass of cold lemonade in my hand. Hank set his brush down and crossed his arms, strategically placing himself between the front gate and me. "Good morning," I said without getting up. My tone was the exact one I used when a student walked into class late without a hall pass. Claire came panting up behind him. She didn't say hello. She went straight on the attack, like a cornered dog that only knows how to bite. "Open this gate right now, Eleanor," she shrieked, grabbing the wooden pickets with desperation. "The little game is over. We are going home right now. The kids are in the car crying from the heat. The kids can come out and get something cold to drink," I replied calmly. "You two will stay outside until you learn some manners." "What is wrong with you?" Claire slammed her hand against the fence. "You are senile. Look what you've done. Spending money on this." She pointed at the repairs, the weeded garden, the fresh paint. "That is my children's inheritance money. You are squandering it." There it was, the real fear. It wasn't love. It wasn't concern for my health. It was the terror that the useless old woman was spending the estate they already counted as their own. I stood up slowly. I set my glass on the side table and walked over to the fence. Hank stepped back respectfully. I took off my sunglasses so they could see my eyes, clear and hard as glass. "Correction, Claire," I said softly. "This is my money. The money I earned working 40 years while you were still learning how to walk, and I am investing it in my happiness, something that, in your house, was costing me way too much." Robert tried to mediate, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Mom, please, it's not about the money. It's just, the house is a disaster. We don't know how the new washing machine works. The baby won't eat unless you do the airplane trick. Jake failed his math test yesterday because nobody sat down to explain it to him. We need you." I looked at him with profound pity. "You don't need me, Robert. You need a maid who doesn't charge. And that position has been permanently eliminated." "Stop saying stupid things," Claire interrupted, pulling out her phone. "I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to tell them you are mentally unstable and that you are blowing through the family savings. I will have you declared incompetent. You crazy old bat." It was the absolute perfect moment to drop the bomb. I pulled my black notebook out of my apron pocket, the one that had been my silent companion during my escape. "Go ahead. Call them," I challenged her, flipping the notebook open. "But before you do, let me read you something. Right here, I have tracked every single penny I have poured into your house over the last 3 years. Groceries, $1,500 a month on average. Utilities, $300. Repairs that Robert doesn't know how to do, another $200. School supplies, uniforms, medicine." I paused for dramatic effect. The silence was broken only by the crashing waves and Claire's heavy breathing. "In total, Claire, I have subsidized your successful couple lifestyle with almost $2,500 a month from my pension and my savings. Without me, you aren't upper middle class. You are defaulting debtors." I watched the color drain completely from Claire's face. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Robert dropped his head in shame. He knew it was true. He knew his salary and hers went entirely to the luxury car payments, the mortgage on the condo in the exclusive zip code, and keeping up appearances. I was the invisible financial pillar holding up their house of cards. Did you really think I was living off you? I let out a dry laugh. You were living off me. The lazy old woman paid your internet bill so you could ignore her in peace. "But," Robert stammered, "you have money? Real money? I thought Dad's money was gone." "What's gone is my patience, son. The money is perfectly safe, and it is very far out of your reach." At that moment, the back door of the SUV swung open. Jake and Lucy came running out. They looked unkempt, and their clothes were dirty, but their faces lit up the second they saw me. "Grandma!" they yelled in unison, sprinting toward the fence. "Kids, get back in the car!" Claire screamed, trying to grab Lucy by the arm, but the little girl yanked away. "No! I want my grandma," the little girl cried, pressing her face against the wooden slats. I gave Hank a nod. He understood instantly and slid the bolt on the gate. I opened my arms and my grandkids crashed into me, nearly knocking me over. They smelled like sweat and stale car air, but I hugged them with everything I had. I felt their little hearts racing against my chest. They were the only innocent casualties in this war. We're hungry, Grandma, Jake said, looking up at me with those big eyes that were identical to his father's. Mom burned the pizza, and Dad only gave us crackers. I looked over the children's heads at Robert and Claire. They stood in the dirt driveway, defeated, locked out of this circle of love that I had built and they had despised. Come on in, I said, but my voice shifted. It was no longer sweet. It was the voice of the property owner. Hank, please help Mr. Robert get the children's bags. Just the children's bags. What about us? Claire asked, her voice trembling, her arrogance deflated like a popped balloon. You are functional adults, aren't you? I replied, guiding my grandkids up toward the porch. There's a very nice hotel 3 blocks down. They take credit cards. I hope yours still has a balance, now that I'm not covering your living expenses. Mom, you can't throw us out, Robert begged, taking a half step inside the gate. I stopped on the first step of the porch and turned around. I am not throwing you out, Robert. I simply am not inviting you in. This is my house. There is no screaming here. There is no disrespect. And above all, here, the old woman makes the rules. If you want to see your kids, you can come visit them from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. But no one sits at my table who calls me useless. Claire looked at me with a potent mix of hatred and sheer respect. For the first time in 3 years, she actually saw me, truly saw me, not as a piece of furniture, not as a burden, but as a woman with power, resources, and the iron will to use them. Let's go, Robert, she said, turning away stiffly, desperately trying to salvage a shred of dignity. Let's go to the hotel. I need a shower. But Mom, the kids? Robert hesitated, looking at his children who were already marching into the kitchen hunting for food. The kids are much better off with me than with you in your current state, I declared. Go. Sleep. And tomorrow, if you manage to lower your voices and apologize like decent human beings, maybe I'll offer you a cup of coffee. Maybe. Hank shut the gate right in their faces the second he set the kids' bags down. I heard the SUV's engine start up again and slowly pull away. I walked inside. Jake and Lucy were devouring the leftover pastries from breakfast. I poured them cold milk, the milk I bought with my own money, in my own freedom. I sat across from them, gently stroking Lucy's hair. I had won the battle, but the war for my dignity was just establishing its new borders. I looked out the window at the ocean. The waves crashed violently, totally indifferent to human drama, constant and powerful. That was exactly how I felt. I had reclaimed my territory. Now I had to teach the invaders that to enter this country, you needed a visa, and the visa was paid in respect. Eat slow, my sweethearts. I smiled at them. Grandma isn't going anywhere. The morning sun in Cedar Key isn't just light. It's a declaration of intent. It slips through the kitchen shutters and drapes itself across the wooden table like a lazy cat, illuminating the breakfast crumbs and the smiling faces of my grandkids. It has been 3 months since I took that cab in the dead of night. 3 months since my daughter-in-law's "you are good for nothing" transformed into the rocket fuel for my rebirth. Today, the house smells of freshly baked bread and strong coffee, the kind that wakes the dead, not the industrial disinfectant I used to try to scrub my existence away in my son's apartment. Jake and Lucy are sitting on the floor, drawing maps on large sheets of poster board. They aren't maps of faraway countries, but maps of Grandma's Island, as they've baptized this plot of land. Jake meticulously charts the location of the mango tree, while Lucy fills the ocean with smiling sharks. Seeing them like this, calm, free from the anxiety of making a mess, free from the constant blare of the TV, confirms that my escape wasn't an act of selfishness, but an act of salvation for both me and them. Robert and Claire arrived an hour ago. This time there was no screaming at the fence, no threats of calling the cops. They rang the bell, waited, and when I opened the door, they were holding grocery bags, not suitcases to move in. It's just a regular Sunday, but it feels like a massive diplomatic victory after a long, silent war. "Good morning, Mom," Robert said as he walked in, kissing me on the cheek with a shyness I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Claire walked in behind him. She didn't hug me. That would be asking blood from a stone, but she held my gaze and nodded. "Hi, Eleanor. I brought those fruits you like. And I brought my own coffee. I know yours is too strong for me." I smiled to myself. It was an olive branch, a small, dry one, but a branch nonetheless. The dynamic has shifted radically. During the first few weeks after I left, the chaos in their lives was absolute. Without my money plugging the holes in their domestic economy, they had to face the brutal reality of their finances. The luxury car had to go back. They moved into a smaller apartment, one they can actually afford on their real salaries. And most importantly, they had to learn how to be parents. I watched them from the kitchen as I finished preparing lunch. Robert was in the yard with Hank, learning how to prune the bushes. He was sweating, pricking his fingers on the thorns, but he didn't quit. Hank, with infinite patience, was showing him how to hold the shears. It's not about force, Mr. Robert. It's about finesse. The plant tells you where to cut, the old fisherman explained. Claire was in the living room, sitting on the rug with baby Nikki. She didn't have her phone in her hand. She was building a tower of blocks, talking to the boy, looking him right in the eyes. She looked exhausted. Yes, her nails were no longer perfect red acrylic claws. They were trimmed short, painted with a clear coat. The stress of the real world had stripped away her super executive mask, but paradoxically, it made her look more human, more real. "Grandma, can I put a volcano on the map?" Jake asked, pulling me from my thoughts. "Of course you can, sweetheart. But remember, volcanoes are dangerous and beautiful at the same time. Like the truth?" I winked at him. I served lunch out on the back deck. Fried flounder, hush puppies, and a fresh salad. No complicated menus or special diets. At my table, you eat what's served. And what's served is delicious because it is seasoned with peace. Halfway through the meal, Robert nervously cleared his throat. I knew the moment for the serious conversation had arrived. "Mom, we wanted to thank you," he started, pushing his fork around his plate. "Not just for having us over today, but, well, for everything." Claire looked up from her food. A tense silence fell over the table, broken only by the sound of the surf and the kids clinking their silverware. "What Robert is trying to say," she chimed in, her voice steady but stripped of its old arrogance, "is that we realized. We had to hit rock bottom to realize it. When you cut off the money, we thought you were being cruel. We were furious. So angry." "I know," I said calmly, pouring myself more sweet tea. But then, Claire sighed, setting her fork down. "Then the bills came, and the cleaning, and the kids got sick. And we realized that we weren't a functional family. We were a corporation that operated entirely because of you, and you were the unpaid employee." I looked at my daughter-in-law. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a woman who had been humbled by life and possessed the courage to learn the lesson. "I wasn't an employee, Claire," I corrected gently. "I was the safety net. And safety nets are dangerous because they make you forget that you have to learn how to walk the tightrope all by yourself." "We're sorry, Mom," Robert said, and this time his voice broke. "We called you useless, and the useless ones were us." I reached across the table and took my son's hand. His palms were rough from the yard work he'd just been doing. "I like that texture. It's done. The past is a map we've already traveled, son. What matters is where we are heading now." And the now was bright. Not perfect, but bright. After lunch, we established the new rules of engagement, or as I like to call it, the Treaty of Cedar Key. They come down 2 weekends a month. They don't come to be served. They come to coexist. Robert is in charge of the grill or the yard work. Claire handles washing the dishes and organizing activities for the kids. I am the grandmother, just the grandmother. My job is to spoil them, tell stories, and watch the sunset. My money remains mine. I decided to invest a portion of it in the local town school. I bought computers, books, and of course, brand new maps. 3 afternoons a week, I go down to tutor the local fishermen's kids in geography. They call me Miss Eleanor. When I walk down the dirt roads of the town, people greet me with respect. I am not anyone's old woman. I am a distinguished citizen of my small community. That afternoon, as Robert and Claire were packing up to leave, because they know now they cannot stay the night without an express invitation, I sat in my rocking chair. Claire walked over to say goodbye. "Eleanor," she said, hesitating for a second, "thank you for not giving us the money for Nikki's milk that day." I looked at her, genuinely surprised. "Why on earth are you thanking me for that?" It was hard. Because Robert had to go sell his video game console that exact same afternoon to buy the formula, she said. A half smile played on her lips. It was the first time I ever saw him sacrifice something of his own for the family without me having to beg him. I think that was the day he actually became a father. I nodded, satisfied. My plan had worked better than I ever anticipated. Not only had I liberated myself, but I had forced them to liberate themselves from their own immaturity. Drive safe on the highway, I told them. And Claire, next time bring that lemon pie you say you make so well. I'd like to try it. Her eyes lit up. It was a challenge, but it was also an invitation. I will, and I promise you're going to like it. I watched them buckle the kids into the car, which was no longer the massive SUV of the year, but a modest second-hand sedan. Jake and Lucy waved frantically from the window. Bye, Grandma. Keep the map safe, Jake yelled. When the car disappeared around the bend in the road, the silence returned to my porch. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was a silence brimming with possibilities. Hank walked around from the back of the house, wiping his hands on a rag. They left happy, boss lady, he commented, leaning against a porch column. They left better, Hank, which is different. I stood up and walked down toward the beach. The sun was beginning to dip, painting the sky in those shades of violet and orange that only exist over the Gulf. My feet sank into the warm sand. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It smelled like salt, like freedom, and like dignity. I thought about the Eleanor from 3 months ago, that hunched over, aching woman scrubbing plates while crying in silence. I wanted to reach back through time, hug her and tell her, hold on, woman, have patience. The lioness inside you is only taking a nap. I have discovered that old age is not the end of the road, nor is it a dark corner where you sit and wait for death. It is a summit, and from up here, the view is absolutely spectacular. I am 71 years old. My knees sometimes crack like dry branches, and I need glasses to read the fine print. But I am the undisputed owner of my time, my space, and my destiny. I have learned that respect isn't asked for. It is imposed through actions. That love does not mean servitude. And that sometimes, the greatest act of love you can offer your children is letting them fall so they can learn how to stand back up. I pulled my black notebook from my pocket, the one that had been my confidant and my emotional ledger. I flipped to the very last page, the one that was still blank. I took out a pen and wrote down a single sentence, so I would never forget it, so I could read it every morning with my coffee. Never apologize for taking up your space in the world. I looked out at the ocean, massive, eternal, unstoppable. A wave crashed against the jetties, throwing up white sea foam. I am that rock. I have weathered the storms, I have taken the hits, and I am still standing here. A little more polished, perhaps. Definitely harder, but entirely unmovable. The breeze tangled my hair, that gray hair I no longer dye, because I have earned every single silver strand like a medal of war. I smiled. Tomorrow I have a class with the town kids. We are going to study the continents. I am going to teach them that the world is big, enormous, and that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to tell you that your place is in a small, dark corner. The lazy old woman has a lot of work left to do, and damn, am I going to enjoy it. I turned around and walked back to my house, my castle, where the only queen is me, and where happiness is no longer a gift I wait for others to hand me, but a harvest I cultivate with my own 2 hands. Life begins many times as you dare to reboot it, and mine, my real life, has only just begun.